Hi, welcome back to Central Line. I'm your host, Katie Berlin. I have a guest today with us from the icy north, which is how I always think of Canada.
Not yet.
I know, in my head, it's like iced over all the time, and I'm like, it's not the North Pole. It is actually just Canada, and Canada is very beautiful. Mike Pownall, welcome to Central Line.
Hi, Katie. How are you? Thank you for inviting me.
Would you mind giving us a little introduction to who you are and what it is you're passionate about?
Sure. So, veterinarian, class of 2001, graduated from the Ontario Veterinary College in the cold north of Canada. I'm an equine vet, so odd for this podcast. So my wife and I founded our practice, Mike Pownall Equine Services, and now we have 3 locations over the Greater Toronto area. With about 15 vets, 30 support staff. 10 years ago, I completed an MBA, and since then, I've been doing a lot of splitting my time between running my own practice, but also doing a lot of consulting with vets literally across the world, from Australia, the Middle East, Europe, all across North America, focusing a lot on human resources and marketing.
So you have seen... You've been around the veterinary community block a few times, is basically what you're saying.
Yeah. Yes, a couple.
And as an equine vet, I'm really excited to get your take on a lot of challenges that the veterinary profession faces in general, which is what we're really going to talk about today, is where we can use, the bridging the gaps between our different areas of veterinary medicine to get a better understanding of how we can do better work and serve our clients well and feel well and do well ourselves.
Absolutely. There's so many similarities. So yeah. Glad to have this call.
I'm one of those people that wanted to be an equine vet, and I went into vet school for about 5 minutes. Then I realized that it just that was not going to work out. And it's probably good because my back would have given out after like year 2.
You know what? But when everybody says that equine practice is so tough, and I'm like, yes, but we don't have scratchy, bitey cats.
Yeah, truth. And people who did not grow up around horses, I think, would rather do almost anything than be an equine vet. But as a horse lover myself, I do envy all that time with them that you guys get. So, but speaking of that, I don't currently ride, but that was always my area. Going to the barn was kind of my escape from things. Do you have a third space where you don't have to be Dr. Mike or the boss or, the consultant, where you can just be yourself and kind of lose yourself in what you're doing?
Well, just being at home with my wife and our 4 cats. But you know what I really enjoy is traveling. My wife and I travel a bit, but when it's the end of the day or weekends, love getting out and hiking. Just, the weather right now, and it's the end of September, it's just beautiful. I want to be outside as much as possible.
Yeah, same here. Colorado provides unlimited places to do that, and so it feels very hard to stay inside all day right now. It's a good problem to have.
And especially because we both know, where you are in Colorado and in Canada, winter will come. So let's enjoy it while we can. Yeah,
absolutely. One of the reasons I moved out here is because we get so much sun, even while it's cold, and at least that helps you kind of grin and bear it a little bit better. I like being outside all year, and so Pennsylvania was a little bit less hospitable, just got real gray.
Yes.
So, yeah. All right. Well, so today we're coming together. Actually, we met because we were introduced by our friends at CareCredit, who, as we know, are big supporters of Central Line. They're our sponsor this year. They've been such great support for us and of the veterinary profession and community in general. They really do have their hearts in a great place. And Synchrony did a study, the Equine Lifetime of Care study, not too long ago, and that's what we are sort of coming together to talk about is what was found in that study and what can we learn from it. So can you just give us a little bit of background on what that study talked about and
Sure.
the big findings you think are relevant?
Yeah, so they talked to about 1,200 U.S. horse owners, and from the ages of 18 to 79, and there was some surveys, but they also reached out to, some key influencers to get some more information. And what they're trying to do is really understand the financial, emotional, and psychological effects of the cost of equine care. And I think that's one thing that really makes the professions different, or the species different, is, equine care is much more expensive, I would say, on an annual basis, just the upkeep and the regularity of things. And so they really want to understand what's the average horse owner, what are they involved with, what industries are they involved with, and what do they spend? And so I'm not going to get too deep into the data, but of the people that responded, about a quarter of them were competitors, a quarter were backyard or pasture horses, and half of them were recreational. And then the generational types, half were boomers, 19% were millennial, 24% Gen X, the rest would be Gen Z or did not want to talk about it. And so the cost per year to have a horse, so if you're just a backyard, just a pasture horse, it's close to $12,000 a year. Recreational, just over $16,000, and competitive, close to $37,000. What I found, what I took away from this and was interesting for my own practice was that, and I think this would apply to companion animal too, and I'm really happy to get your feedback though, is that 85% of responders feel some sort of stress about the expenditures on the horse. Generationally, the older you are, which probably means you're a bit, you have a bit more money saved, you're a little bit more financially secure. The older you are, the less anxious, so the younger you are, like they said, like 93% of millennials feel anxiety about the expenses involved with their horse.
It's all those trips to Starbucks, just can't.
Oh yeah, it's just all the Starbucks. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. If they just
avocado toast.
If they didn't get all that stuff, they'd be fine. So, but here was interesting. So 83% of horse owners feel prepared for the expense of owning a horse. But if we remember that 85% feel stress. And the reason why is that most of the time, I think this is key, they underestimate the cost or the total cost of care, or they underestimate how much an emergency is going to cost. And so their actual expenses in this report are often 3 to 4 times higher than what they were thinking of spending. So even though they've saved some money or they have a little nest egg put aside for, that rainy day or something that's going to happen, it's often not enough. And when something happens, they're ill prepared. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And again, the younger they are, the more this is a bigger stress.
Do you I don't think this was in the study, but just from your perspective, having been in this business for a while, do you feel like the demographics of horse ownership are changing? The way that we see like millennials and Gen Z really, going all in on pet ownership and like, having pets instead of children, like buying houses so their dogs can have a yard and stuff like that. But do you see either something parallel or inverse happening in horse ownership because the costs are so high?
What we look at with horses and what we see time after time is that, in general, I mean, there are some discipline differences, but in general, our key horse owner will be a professional woman over the age of 40. And it'll last till about 70.
Yeah.
But what happens is that often people are involved in horses when they're young or in teenagers. They drop out because of school. And then they need to start a life. And so, whether it's a career, family, having, spouse, what have you. And then when there's a little bit of stability as they get into their 40s, then they're like, okay, now I have the time and the resources to get back into horses again. We see this time and time again.
Yeah, that makes total sense. There's no reason that would have changed. And I feel like, that's essentially going to be my trajectory as I look into getting back into horses now in my 40s, when I can, do that and not feel so much guilt about like having a roof over my head and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
But it is definitely, it is such an expensive pursuit. And it really, it doesn't surprise me that people say they feel prepared, but also anxious, because I would say that when I had horses as an adult, and I really didn't have the money to support the lifestyle, but I really wanted them in my life, I was anxious about the cost all the time, but also knew it was going to be a lot when it happened. When horse owners, I feel like from a young age are sort of trained to see vet care as expensive and to know that everything costs a lot. And this could just be a perception of mine, because when I was working in the vet clinic, it seemed like dog owners especially, and I'm thinking about people who like here in Colorado, everybody hikes with their dog, takes them paddle boating, like bikes with the dog running alongside. Those dogs are going to get hurt more than your average, house dog like my Chihuahua, and kind of like horses, you do stuff, there's a risk with that. And many of them are totally unprepared for how much it costs to say do a TPLO or hospitalize the dog when it eats poisonous mushrooms or something like that. Do you think that is that just a perception that I have just because I did grow up with horses? Or do you feel like people in general are like, yeah, horses are really expensive and I'm not going to be all that surprised when I get that bill? I won't like it.
Yeah. So I think people realize that just the ongoing care of horses is expensive because you've got to stable them, you've got to pay for a farrier, but it's always that surprise. And I guess I imagine it'd be the same way with companion animal. If they swallow something, we have 4 cats, and all of a sudden we got to bring it to the vets, and we have nothing to compare to because, fortunately, an emergency is rare. I think of my own life. So 5 years ago, we had a bad storm. A bunch of tiles came off our roof. We had to get the roof redone. Thankfully, we had insurance. I can tell you, though, that the cost of what I thought the roof repair was going to was about 3 times what it actually was.
Yeah.
And you're like, thank God for insurance. But we if you're doing it all the time, if you've got a horse that's always sick or a dog that's always sick or cat, you sort of get an idea what it is. But when it's this random encounter and, not only is it expensive, but you're emotionally distressed, and the combination are tough.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's also another factor, which is, when a lot of care is being provided on the farm, there might be wound care or something. Like there's a lot of stuff that horses have go wrong that doesn't necessitate them being brought to an equine facility. And I don't remember ever getting an estimate, a treatment plan to look at. I mean, maybe we talked about cost a little bit. The vet would sort of say, oh, it's going to cost about this much to do this injection or to, do this treatment. But for the most part, it was like, just do it because we got to do it. And here's the plan. And I just said yes, because the horse is standing there and it needs it. And that seems to me to be very different from the plan that a lot of veterinary hospitals have now, which is to present a treatment plan, like a paper estimate in front of the client and go through it itemized, so that the client sees that total before they're at the checkout. Whereas with the equine vet, I often just got a bill in the mail, and that was very scary. Is that changing now, or is that still what happens?
That's starting to change. People want estimates, so if you're going out there for a colic or an emergency, you could tell them, people want to know because, I could do something, or our practice could do something on the farm that's going to be, let's say, $1,000. But if our medications our treatments are not resolving it, and we have to refer to a specialist, so a colic surgery, for example, we can treat that at the farm, let's say $750. But if you go to the vet school or a referral facility and there's a surgery and it's, time in the hospital, all of a sudden your bill's at $10,000.
Oh my God, it adds up so fast.
It adds
it's
up
by
so
the minute.
quickly. Yeah. And so, you need to prepare people because, and I think you need to be realistic with them that, hey, your horse is 26. The odds of them surviving the surgery are low, and people just want to be informed. And one of the things we have found, no matter what we're doing, even just not an emergency, but a bigger one-time expense. So like doing a pre-purchase exam where we're going to examine the horse before somebody buys it. they can get quite pricey depending on the amount of x-rays. And so you can talk to people and they're like, oh, we want to barely do any x-rays. We just want to do a physical. So we're like, okay, fine. And we've quoted it. Everything is out there. But then we're like, you know what? We need to x-ray the fetlock or, a joint. And, x-rays in the quote are, let's say, $70 each. At the time, people are really poor at mathematics. So they think of the 70 and they're like, oh, that's not bad. Okay, yeah, so I can do that. 8 x-rays later, then they're like, oh my gosh, that's almost $600. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So the more we can spend the time to prepare them and to have the discussion of what the cost is, it's essential. I mean, I think, a key competency of being a vet now is your ability to communicate. And this is a big part of it.
Do you think people are more likely to say yes to a large estimate if they know they don't have to pay it right away? Like at the vet clinic, you got to just hand over the credit card right away. And the equine vet, you're going to get a bill in the mail, but that's like a future you problem.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of our vets told us something once a while ago, and I thought it was really a great insight is, when you're presenting what the cost could be, and maybe you're going to give them a couple of options. Like, if money was no option, I would do this, but, obviously money is an option. It is for most of us. So this may be a good alternative, still great medicine, but an alternative. And when they get silent, they're not thinking like, I don't want to pay for this, but they're often thinking like, okay, what do I have to give up to afford this? Because as you said earlier, I mean, horses are similar to dogs or cats or other animals in that they have become pets. And people are like, okay, I'll give up this vacation. Maybe I'll put off another year for that new deck on the house or what have you. So that, they want to do what's best for their horse. And so they just need to think about it. So, but I think, and this is, that tie-in with CareCredit, and that is when they have that option of like, okay, there's a way I can pay for this over time. You can pay this in advance or pay down the road a little bit. Then that's okay. I can budget that.
Yeah, that definitely makes it more palatable. And I used my first CareCredit card to pay for my cat's dental last fall. It was $4,000 because he had like the CT and all the stuff, and I was really grateful to have that option then because it did seem much more palatable to me.
Sure.
Could I have made it work? Yes. Would I have paid a lot in interest if I had to pay it, right then on a regular credit card and then pay it off over time like I ended up doing? That would have been very expensive. So I definitely, that's an option that I didn't even know about when I had a horse. So what about the advice that we're given? I don't know about you, but in vet school, so I graduated in 2009, and we were told that vets should stay out of the cost conversation. This is, obviously mostly small animal focused. And we should send a technician in, or another staff member to go over the estimate and, itemize the cost for the client. And in my experience, that wasn't always the best solution. And it left me feeling a little bit powerless, especially if the client said no to stuff. What do you think about that advice as an equine vet who probably had to go over the costs like themselves most of the time?
Yeah, I think cost is so related to care that when you advocate that discussion about cost, then you're not part of the response. You're not part of the conversation about care.
Yeah.
So on one hand, I get it because veterinarians historically, in general, were really good at negotiating down. And so we'll look at it something like, oh my gosh, that's so expensive. Yeah. And we price it as we would think, and it's like, I can't tell them it's $2,000. All right, $1,500.
Yeah.
Whereas, usually the non-vets are better at saying like, hey, this stuff is expensive. All right, we're going to charge it. So that's the point. But I think you just need to have training with the vets, and there's ways of doing that. But I think when you're talking about care and the questions that will arise, so if you're going to give 2 or 3 options and you're talking price and somebody's like, well, what happens if we do this or do that? Yes, a well-trained, registered technician can discuss it. But I think when you, as a veterinarian, you remove yourself from this conversation, you lose a lot of control. And I think you lose a lot of that relationship with the client, that trusting relationship. So, yeah, I think the vet needs to be part of that conversation.
Yeah, you just mentioned trust, and I think that's very reflective of my experience, which is that if you kind of like don't run away from the problem, face the music with the client. Like, I don't want to have this conversation any more than you do. Huh. And there's nothing wrong with saying that, like nobody likes talking about money and asking for money, and we're asking for a lot of money. I mean, even, you were saying like, $1,000, that's a lot of money, especially to somebody sitting in a vet clinic with a cat, they're not expecting to spend $1,000 on this cat. And so, saying like, I know this is, this might come as a surprise, but like, let me break it down for you. And then we'll talk about if there's anything that we can do to keep the cost down, if we have to. And there's something about that just like, it makes us a little bit vulnerable. And that vulnerability on our part creates more trust with the client, I think.
So I think we have to have that conversation of the expense versus the value. Yeah. And so you can talk about, well, and be very frank. Yes, this is a lot of money. Mm-hmm. Like we're talking 5 digits. Yes, this is expensive, but this is the reality of the cost of care. Yeah. And as you said, you break it down, and here are the components.
Yes.
And, I would say the one thing I have found in my travels is that Americans are better with those discussions than Canadians because of our government funded healthcare. Yeah. We have no idea what medicine costs.
Yeah.
And so it's free. But it's not, but it's free. And so when you start talking about pet healthcare, that's a harder discussion.
Yeah, although we are very good at forgetting that we have paid like $500 to $800 that month for that health insurance, and so we're forgetting that we've already forked out a huge amount of money for that care that then only costs $2,000. Yeah. So I am very good at forgetting that. Anyway, it's like, oh well, that's a written off expense. I haven't thought about it. It just happens, and it's a lot. There's no perfect model, but I definitely agree that at least, when somebody gets a bill for their knee surgery and it's, $40,000 just for this part of it, that is definitely a wake-up call for us. Okay, what about insurance? Like, since we're talking about that, as long as I've known horse people and had horses in my life, I've known about equine insurance. Like, I showed horses growing up, and we always had insurance. But pet insurance has been pretty slow to to catch on in this country.
Yeah, one of the reasons why equine insurance is slow to pick up is just the cost of the horses.
Yeah.
So when you have, a high-end show horses, and I've known people that have, you're talking to, a horse that has won a bunch and is quite valuable. And you ask, well, is it insured? They're like, no. And you're like, why? Well, we have 4 like this, and to insure them, we just, you can't afford the insurance on them.
Yeah.
So I think it's below 10% in North America. Yeah, it's pretty low.
Yeah, that really surprises me. But I guess, if I had an older horse, a retired horse, a backyard horse, I probably wouldn't insure that horse. I insured the show horse because if he colicked or something, I was really going to need that because I wanted to be able to do surgery on him. And
but I think these are where we have to have these proactive conversations with clients. Is an unexpected expense will happen at some point in the animal's life. It's kind of, if you get away without it, you're lucky, or you didn't notice it. But it's going to happen. And I think as a vet practice, I think we need to have discussions with clients, maybe in how we onboard new clients, our welcome package, what have you, our discussions about the value of insurance, any financial provider to sort of like, when something unexpected happens, it doesn't have to be an emergency. It's just, could be a routine dentistry, but there's a lot of extractions that have to happen. You know what? There are solutions in place that are going to make things easier for you at the time, as opposed to, oops, we're here, now we have to deal with it.
Yeah. That was a question I was going to ask you, because there seems to be a big reluctance. Like, this profession, I've never met a group of people who like talking about money less. And I think it's because we all got into this because of our hearts and not because we wanted to get rich. And so we really just hate talking about it. And good care does cost a lot. I had my first boss wouldn't let us say expensive and cheap. He would say it costs more or it's more cost effective. So I got very used to not saying cheaper. This is the cheaper option. It's a more cost effective option. But I feel like the big reluctance on the part of vet teams is that we don't want to seem focused on the money. We don't want to be like, hey, just so you know, we're going to be asking you for a lot of money, like pretty much every year forever. And how would you say, so I liked what you said about including, if you have like a welcome packet or something when new clients get a new animal or they join your practice, or, that puppy visit, it just becomes par for the course to sort of include financial information. But do you have like tricks or tips for how we can sort of phrase that and approach that conversation without seeming like we're like trying to prepare the client for the fact that this is going to be super expensive?
Yeah. Well, the one thing I wanted to say is that I think the best practice is to train as many people in your organization other than vets about money so you can have these discussions. Because often the client will be there with a technician.
Yeah.
While the doctor's out of the room, just like we'll be way at our truck, and the conversation will be happening. And so they need to be able to have some, comfort talking about money.
Yeah.
There's a few things that we just say is that, starting off is we want what's best for your horse, dog, cat, hamster, whatever. But the cost of the diagnostics and treatments would be a challenge for everyone. So let's think about options that can make this affordable so we're doing the best for your horse. And I think always coming back, as you said earlier, is that healthcare is expensive or there's an expense associated with it. Let's not skirt that. Let's confront the elephant in the room. Just like we're going to talk about money, but we're talking about it in context of what is optimal for the healthcare of your particular animal.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about, we're not set up to offer extended terms, which is why we partner with companies that can help you. Payment plans for large expenses are common. I was online looking at pricing an iPad the other day. So much of what we're doing in life is based on payment terms. And so it is common, and I think millennials are more, Gen Zs are more open to that. There are a lot of companies out there promoting that services. I think some of us who are getting older, it's, we're sort of like, oh, if I don't have the money, I shouldn't be able to afford it. I shouldn't pay for it. But, it's different.
Yeah.
So let's just have the conversations.
This AAHA podcast is brought to you by CareCredit. CareCredit understands that all veterinary teams are busier than ever. To help patients get the care they need, the CareCredit Health and Pet Care Credit Card allows clients to access a budget-friendly financing experience anytime, from anywhere on their own smart device. They can learn, see if they pre-qualify, apply, and even pay if approved, all on that smart device. With just a tap, they have a friendly, contactless way to pay over time for the services and treatments their pet needs, whether it be a general, referring, or specialty hospital, as long as they accept the CareCredit credit card. I like that, and it follows the trend of sort of authenticity and, sort of supporting brands that you feel are telling the truth to you, that I think younger, like millennials and younger, seem to really identify with. It's like they're willing to pay more for something if they really believe that it's for a good cause or for the right cause. And that reminds me of a comment that you had said. We had a pre-call before this a couple weeks ago, and you had said that a lot of times the equine vet is the last one to see the horse, and it's like after the client has exhausted all the other options. So they've like been on their online forums, and they've had the chiropractor out who may or may not be a vet, but it's probably a different vet. It's like the client has 3 vets depending on what they're going to want done, and they might have a lay dentist. We won't even get into that, but clients will talk to everyone they can before they have you out, and then you come out and the treatment that you're offering is the right treatment, but things are more advanced now, and also it might cost more because it's been going on for a while and you haven't seen it. Do you feel like the best medicine for that is to try to get around it and say, okay, we're going to try to educate clients so that they don't do this? Or do you feel like that's just the behavior in the society we live in now? And so now our goal is really to focus our energy on having those transparent cost conversations about what you're getting for that value and why it's important to be prepared. Sort of like, do you fight a bad review with just, a bunch of good reviews, or do you respond to it?
I think the right answer for everything is always it depends.
Yeah.
But so when I first encountered and we were having this discussion, it was just like this horse showed up with us a year later, and they've gone through everybody, and by the time they get to us, their budget is exhausted. So I talked earlier in this lifetime of care is that people save money. Well, by the time they got to the vets, the money had been gone. And so you have to wonder, okay, so why do they not want to come to us first? That's really the first question. Mm-hmm. Is it a general perception of veterinarians? Is this a person who is never going to spend the money anyhow? So there's a lot of variabilities. What we recommend, what we do in our own practice is develop that reputation of trust, of the thorough diagnosis. Some people go to a vet in the equine world because I think the people are much more promiscuous of the vet use.
Yes.
And as you said, people often have 3 or 4 vets, and so they'll try one vet because, you're in a barn and the 3 or 4 vets service the barn, so you don't really have that captive audience. And so, people will come to us and say, what, I heard that you were expensive, but after I saw what you did is you actually got an answer. And with my previous other experiences, there'd be 2 or 3 visits. We would try one course of treatments, and that didn't work, and then we would try another. And when you add all that up, it's way more expensive than what we paid for one visit with you. So I think developing that reputation as a practice of that transparency, of that you're doing the best for the care of the animal, but there's a price associated with it, and you can't be embarrassed or ashamed or dismissive of it. It's part and parcel.
Yeah.
We want to pay people well. We want to give people time off. We want to have great diagnostics. All of this costs money, so we can't be skirting it.
Especially now when it seems like it's harder and harder to find equine vets, and there are areas that are sort of equine veterinary deserts now because they just don't have enough vets to work all the hours and drive all the miles.
It's everywhere. I mean, one of the things I've learned from this global approach and the clients I've had, they're having the same conversations in Australia and Germany and Dubai.
It's pretty
and
crazy.
It's not just equine, it's all species. I mean, I get Google alerts on veterinarians that come up every day, and usually the first 3 or 4 is some newspaper, and it could be Nevada, Pennsylvania, wherever. It's like, shortage of vets. How do our clients, what are pet owners to do? It's everywhere.
Yeah. It's almost like there are problems in the profession that we need to address. It's almost like that.
Shocking. Yes.
Yeah. But, I just really, the honesty and forthrightness that you're talking about really appeals to me. It works when we're talking about any type of conversation with clients, I think. It's just like not skirting the truth, trying to be direct with them as early as possible, as often as possible. And at least at the end of the day, if things don't go the way that you wish they would have, you can sleep well at night knowing that you did everything you could to communicate well and clearly to them.
Yep. That's what I say. There's the cost, and then there's the value, and the value is what person thinks of, with the result minus the cost. Mm-hmm. And we don't, in our profession, we don't always get great patient outcomes. It's just the nature of our business.
Yep.
But we always talk about client outcomes versus patient outcomes, and you could do the best patient outcome. You've done the most, current surgery with the newest technology, but if you haven't discussed the pricing and aftercare and all that with the client, and they're upset, it's bad client outcome. It's like going to a restaurant. You can have the best meal, but when the service is surly, you're never going back there.
Yeah.
You can have a mediocre meal, but when they're fawning over you and you feel like you're special, you're going to go back.
Okay, so last question before I let you go, but I'm thinking about how much aftercare that you just mentioned, how much of that is involved in most sort of horse things that, are more than just something super minor, whether it's like, and horse people love to like do stuff. It's like we got to put the cream on it. Like if there's a cream to put on it, we want to do that. But also, wrapping legs and cold hosing and hand walking and resting and, put them in the round pen for 20 minutes a day and then work up to 30 minutes. There's so many instructions usually, and people are busy and they're at boarding barns and you don't necessarily know how the boarding barn is going to handle it or if they have enough staff to do it. There's just so many factors in horse aftercare when something happens. And so a lot of the success, a lot of the outcome depends on the horse owner.
Yep.
Is that a conversation that you have too, which is like, hey, this is going to cost more in the end if you don't do this?
Yeah, and I think there's two approaches to that. So let's say we talked earlier about the older horse that might go for surgery. Okay. Mm-hmm. There's going to be this bit of aftercare. Surgical aftercare it's more patience. There could be complications, and so which may require another visit back to the surgical facility. But when you're talking about things like laminitis or founder or wounds or what have you, as you said, lots of bandage changes, lots of cold hosing. There's a lot of, and we talk to them when we're making decisions. Like, okay, here's the price for us to address today. But, the success and the outcome is dependent on how much time you have. And that's, again, it's like money. You've got to have that frank conversation, because if somebody's like, I can't spend 2 hours a day aftercare.
Yeah.
Then it's like, okay, well, maybe we're going to try option C. Like, it's just not going to work. And so, again, back to our being trustworthy, being transparent. Mm-hmm. You sort of can't do this, hey, we'll get them in there because it's best for the horse, but then you realize that the care is going to diminish afterwards. Nobody wants to see that. And I think when clients get surprised by the time and expense of the aftercare, often the aftercare is more expensive than the procedure, they can get pretty annoyed.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Surgery is not the end game. And that's the case with like a TPLO too, or a foreign body surgery. There's so many things that have to happen after that for the outcome to be good. So that's a really good point. And I do think that we in small animal do sometimes let that slide because we're just so focused on getting the client to say yes to the treatment that we want to do at that moment. But like, it's like the blocked cat, right? If you use all the client's money to unblock the cat one time, there's a very good chance that cat's going to block again. And then what? And then the client's mad because you used all of their money. And that might be what what happens, to him one time, you hope for the best. But like, if you haven't had that conversation, that sets you up for failure.
Yeah, I really, as we're talking, and the theme is really coming out, is having these expansive conversations, not just this moments of time. Like, like, here's what's going to happen if you don't. Here's what happens if you can. Here's option 2. And, guide people. The one thing is not giving too many choices. That just confuses people.
Yes. Yeah. At a certain point, people kind of want to be told what to do, but they...
Exactly.
Yeah. Do you see a role? I keep thinking of more questions I want to ask you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go.
Do you see a role for telemedicine here, or like telehealth? Being employed to have some of these conversations. If you're like in a time crunch and like, what, I got to run because I got a colic to go treat, or I have 3 patients waiting, and all my exam rooms are full. I don't have the staff to have a long conversation about this right now, but I will have somebody call you. We'll set up a video call and we'll have this conversation face to face at another time. Is that something that you do or have done or seen done?
We don't do it. I would love to do it. I think in our profession, I don't know how much the pushback is in companion animal. I know there's a lot of people talking about it when the pandemic first hit. I don't know how much of that has lingered, but I think with the shortages that we're having of not just veterinarians but support staff, I think that's could be an essential tool. I think, like anything, we need to know the limitations of it. I just always harken back to, I remember once somebody's calling me from a horse show saying their horse had a laceration over a joint. I said, send me a picture. It looks superficial. I'm like, you know what? You don't have to pay for an emergency fee. Trying to think of how I can save them some money, and just as we've been talking about. And I said, one of my colleagues will be at the horse show there tomorrow. They can have a look at it, save you money. don't worry about it. Well, he called me the next day and said this was a deep penetrating wound that just narrowly missed a joint. And that could have been catastrophic. And so there's limitations with telemedicine, is that we're only able to see 2-dimension, and depending on the color of the fur or the hair, it may give us false confidences. But, I've talked to behaviorists, and they're like, I can do my best consults with telemedicine because I'm seeing them at home. And when I say, show me what they're doing and what does it look like? Yeah. Beautiful. They can see it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And that, I think, is a whole other, can of worms to open, is how accurate a diagnosis can be, even for something that seems very simple over telemedicine. And I think maybe telemedicine, it technically is telehealth that I'm talking about, but maybe I'm thinking of it in a slightly different light, which is you've already seen the patient, you've already established the recommended treatment. It's not a dire emergency where you have to make a decision at that time, or it's a preventive care exam and you've done it, and you know that the client is anxious about money, and rather than rush the conversation and let them sort of leave feeling flustered and anxious about it, you say, okay, we're going to continue this conversation after you've had a chance to think about it, and before we decide what to do going forward, and then we can actually have maybe 15 minutes to talk about just this versus trying to rush it during an appointment that's already going over. I would have appreciated that option a few times, I think.
Well, yeah. I mean, we all say to everybody, I've dumped a load of information on you. You're going to go home. You're going online.
Yeah. You're going to do it. Yep.
So let's talk tomorrow, because you're going to have even more questions tomorrow and after you've slept on it. But to your original point, I think this is where telemedicine, I think, has a great opportunity, is in follow-ups. Because as you said, I just need to see how this dog is moving, or how this horse is moving. I can see that on video.
Yeah.
Don't present an open wound and ask me to do it. Does it need to see a vet? Like, yes.
Yes. Or when people send you a picture on Facebook Messenger and it's like, it's a massive picture and you're seeing the wound like this, and you're like, okay, I'm not going to know anyway, but
So I think so. And, and so we've been looking at that. And one of the things we've been looking at, again, for the affordability of it, is building it into the price of the initial exam.
Oh, yeah. I love that.
So let's say you come in for, I'm just going to talk about horses. It's a lameness exam. We're going to charge you X dollars, but now our new price is going to be X plus, and that includes 2 free telemedicine consults at regular times. So when you're calling them up and you want better compliance, because again, we want what's best for the pet. And if you don't want somebody saying, I don't have time, or I don't have the money this week, but they're all like, you know what, I've already paid for it.
Yeah.
I might as well do it. So let's do it.
I love that. I think that's a fantastic idea. And it makes that initial vet exam seem like a better value, because you're getting, I'm not saying it's a better value, but I'm saying you're getting more for that money, and you're not like, well, what? Just for him to look at, is this much money? I think that's great. It's all about that perception. And we are definitely trained to see a package deal as being a better value.
Yes, 100%.
Well, I think this is great. I think you're showing in this conversation, and we had actually the week that we're recording this. So today we had Andy Davison's episode come out, and her background is in equine as well. She's an LVT, and I really love that, because we tend to view these worlds as so separate, and it's all humans dealing with animals that they love, and money, which no one has enough of. And communication seems to be the key. With animals that can't tell you what's wrong with them. Yes, exactly. Yes. What fun would that be if they could? Exactly. Well, Dr. Mike Pownall, this has been really fun. I really appreciate your input here, and to CareCredit, thank you so much for introducing us, because I think this is a really good perspective to have. Is there any place that you'd like to send listeners/viewers to learn more about you and your business, or resources that you think would be helpful? Sure. They can just go to the website of our vet practice, www.mckeepownall.ca. Fantastic. And we'll drop a link to that Equine Lifetime of Care study in the, and I think there's been a couple of sort of offshoot articles about it that are really good, help summarize the data. So we'll put those in the show notes also. And I really appreciate your time today, Dr. Mike. My pleasure. Anytime. This was fun. Thanks to everyone for listening and watching. We'll catch you next time on Central Line.